Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. And if you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am doing my wrap-up video for April. So I will talk about all of the books that I finished in April, or at least those that I can talk about. I read a total of 16 books in April. Some of them I've already talked about. I read 2 books for the reading project that I am doing with my very good friend AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. We are doing a series called Tuesdays with Toni, and we are reading all of Toni Morrison's novels. And I read 2 of the novels in April, so Song of Solomon and Tar Baby. So I will leave links to both of those videos below, as well as the playlist of all of the books that we've read so far and the videos that AJ and I have done. I am also judging the BookTube Prize, the quarterfinals for the BookTube Prize, and I'm reading for fiction category B, and I have read 4.5 of the books for this round so far. I've read The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt, Foster by Claire Keegan. This is now the second book that I've read by Claire Keegan. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, I think it is. And Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. Now I can't actually talk about any of these books until after this round is over, which will be at the end of May. But I am really looking forward to telling you more about these books and what I thought about them, because I think I may have found a new favorite author in this bunch, which is always very exciting. So I can't tell you about these books, but I will tell you about another book that I read by Kevin Wilson. I read Nothing to See Here, and I loved it. Kevin Wilson has a way of telling a story that you didn't even know needed to be told. I always thought that this cover, I've had this for a while, and I've always thought that this cover was a girl's skirt that was being blown up. But in fact, the book is about twins who spontaneously combust. And that probably seems insane, and it kind of is, but this is written so well. Lillian, who is the main character, had been friends with Madison in high school. They have an interesting past, and Madison, who is now married to a politician and very wealthy man, has asked Lillian to come and help with the children. So for some reason, Lillian becomes connected to these 2 children that no one else really seems to be able to understand, and they all kind of fear because, well, they do catch on fire, but Lillian really begins to care about these children and wants to help. And I thought the character development, especially of Lillian, was excellent. I thought the relationships between all of the characters and the dynamics between the characters was also really well done. So this book made me laugh out loud. It was clever and thoughtful, and I can't wait to read more by Kevin Wilson. Okay, now Middlegrade March happened in March, but I didn't get a chance to read the book that I was hoping until April. So I did Middlegrade March in April, and I read Beatrice and Croc by Lawrence Hill. Lawrence Hill is one of my favorite Canadian authors, and this was his debut for children's books, middle grade book. And it was great fun, even though it is not a normal read for me at all. Lawrence Hill creates this world of Argilia, and we meet Beatrice, who wakes up in this world but can't remember what happened or how she got there. And she meets different animals that all have a way of communicating, and a crocodile named Harry is probably her most unlikely friend, but the 2 need each other in many ways. So what I loved most about this book was the use of language. You can tell that Lawrence Hill loves language. There are made-up words and just a great use of words. Beatrice also has a love of books, and she's figuring out who she is as a young girl with brown skin. She has a great confidence about herself and eventually sees that what makes her different are really the things that make her amazing. So this was a fun read, and I know it was inspired by Lawrence Hill's daughter, Beatrice, and stories that he used to tell her when she was a young girl. So I think that this is enjoyable for middle grade readers, but also for adults as well. In April, I also participated in People April, which was hosted by Roz from Scallydandling About the Books and Elizabeth from Bookwins and Books. And I read 4 books that fit this readathon. The first was the group read, which was The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, which was about the 5 women that Jack the Ripper had murdered. And I found this to be a really interesting read, and just how the author filled in the gaps of these women, because there have been so many myths or stereotypes and mystery around these women and their murder. So it was just interesting to learn this perspective and to understand how these women were poor, to understand the struggles that they had and how their deaths were probably just blips that not very many people paid too much attention to. I think the author did a really great job at putting all the pieces together. Plus, it was really interesting because at the end of the book, it mentions a more recent case, which was another book that I was reading at the time, and I did that as a buddy read with Gemma from Gem of Books. And we read Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And this had been on my shelf for quite some time, and I am so thankful to Gemma for reading this with me. This is the story of how Chanel Miller takes back her identity after she was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner. And this story had a very high profile. I remember it being in the news. And at the time, Chanel was not named. She was referred to as Emily Doe. And this book kind of goes through what happened, the trial, and the effects that it has had on Chanel. And even, I would say the general society in a lot of ways. I was really impressed by Chanel Miller's writing and how she was able to show how she herself changed over time. She changed in her understanding of what was happening, in how she accepted what had happened, and also the reactions that people had. So this will really open your eyes to how victims are treated. Chanel does, I think, a really great job at showing how she was questioned and not prepared. She also does a great job to show, in this case, how Brock Turner was treated because he was a sports star and his family had money. So I really commend Chanel for the letter that she wrote and for being brave enough to share it. This was a really, really good book. Next up was another one of my favorites of the month, and that is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Now, I already talked about this in a book pairing video that I did about books on death row, so I will leave a link to that video below, and you can check that out. I won't say too much here. The only thing I will say is that I have great admiration for Bryan Stevenson and the work that he has done and that he is doing. I also learned a lot about the death penalty that I didn't know before. And this is just definitely a book worth picking up if you are interested in this topic. The last book that I read for People April was Escape from Camp 14 by Blaine Harden. This is the story of Shin Dong-hyuk, who was born inside a North Korean prison camp and escaped, not knowing the outside world at all. This is a really heart-wrenching read. Shin sees his mother and brother die, and even the way that he describes his relationship with his mother is not the way most, young boys would describe their parental relationships. But of course, things were not normal in their situation. The book then describes ways that Shin found ways to survive the camp, his escape, and how difficult it was to be part of a society that he didn't understand afterwards. So here's what I appreciated. This is what I appreciated most. I know nothing really about these camps. So learning that they still exist and that these camps have existed far longer than the Nazi concentration camps, and just how they function was very eye-opening. The psychological aspect of the camps, how people like Shin who grew up in the camps, how they think about things and about other people and themselves, and then of course how one fits into society after they leave. And I find all of that very interesting. So here's the thing. As I was reading the story, I just found that there were a lot of gaps. There was something missing, in some parts that I thought would be integral to the story. And I thought, how, as a journalist, the author left some, I think, really important pieces out. And I felt the escape itself was very thin. How he integrated into society was very thin. And I was trying to also understand, language, cultural barriers and all of that. But it did make me do a bit of research into the story. And that's when I came across, I found out that since the book came out and the story has become more known, there are huge holes in it. And the story isn't exactly what happened. And there are people, including Shin's father, who say that he lied about some things. So I watched a couple of videos on this, and I will link those in the description box below, so you can check that out if you are interested. But it turns out that, maybe he didn't really escape, and maybe he wasn't really at this particular camp. Now, at first, I was a bit angry by this, but I've settled on the fact that there is some truth, and if nothing else, this story makes us more aware of these camps. So, was Shin in a camp? Yes. Did horrible things happen to him? Yes. Has it been hard for him to adjust to society outside the camp? Yes. And just for that, I can appreciate the book. I do wish that the truth was told the first time. And I just feel that maybe, we will never really know the whole truth, and that's fine too. So the next book I want to talk about, I read for the Reading Across Canada 2023 challenge, and we were in Manitoba for April. So I chose Katherena Vermette, who is from the Winnipeg area, and the prompt for the month was to read a book of poetry, a collection of poetry, since April is also International Poetry Month. So I read her poetry collection called River Woman, which was a lovely collection. A lot of it really is about the river. There are titles like River Song, River Locks, River Love, River Story. And then of course it touches upon Métis life, land, and culture. So if you are looking to read poetry from a Métis author, this would be a really good choice for sure. And I think she has another collection out as well, so I might have to look for that and check that out. So this leaves me with 3 more books to share. I already talked about Kevin Wilson, who I think is going to be a new favorite author. Last year, a new favorite author for me was Sally Hepworth, And I read my third book by her in April, and it's called The Younger Wife. Of the 3 books that I've now read by Sally Hepworth, this is probably my least favorite. However, that doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I still enjoyed it very much. I liked the setup the most, I think. This is about a man who is getting married to a younger woman, and the catch is that he's actually already married, and his wife is in a nursing home of some sort. I can't remember if it's a nursing home, but it's not really clear what is wrong with her, except that she seems confused. It's almost like she has dementia, some kind of dementia, but at first you don't know, what the deal is. So Tully and Rachel are the 2 sisters who aren't really sure about this new wife and think that she's probably after their dad's money. They are also furious with their dad and how he is divorcing their mother. So I liked this setup and was wondering where this would go. The story is told in alternating perspectives, which also seems to be a Sally Hepworth thing. And I like it. It's told from the daughter's and the new wife's perspectives. So as we get some backstory, that's when we start to realize that something more sinister is going on. And the question becomes, like, who is telling the truth and who can you trust? Do Tully and Rachel really know their father? Is Heather, the new wife, making up lies? And then, their mother says something that has everyone wondering what the truth is. But how much can she be trusted, right? So this definitely had some good things about it. I didn't love the end. I didn't love these characters as much as I have loved her previous characters in her other books. So I read The Good Sister and The Mother-in-Law. So I really liked those. But I still found this entertaining. So if you are looking for a mystery thriller domestic story, then this could totally work. The next book is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, and I read this on the recommendation of Leo Bancroft, and I am so glad that I did. I really enjoyed this book. The 2 main characters are writers. Eva writes erotica and Shane writes literary books. So it kind of started off where it has this like beach read vibe. Shane is very well known and doesn't really do events. So when he shows up at an event that Eva is at, everyone is shocked, including Eva, because Shane seems to have read all of her work, and everyone in the audience is very aware of the connection between the 2 of them. So slowly we get their backstory and we learn of their past, and then over 7 days they reconnect and may have a second chance. So one of my favorite characters in this book is Eva's daughter. She is an old soul for her age. She says things like they are, and she made me laugh out loud several times. So this story was great. I thought it had a feel-good vibe, even though it also dealt with, some serious stuff. So thanks again to Leo for recommending this, because I really did appreciate reading it. And then the final book I have to share is American War by Canadian author Omar This was his debut novel. It was shortlisted for Canada Reads in, I think, 2018. And I've read Omar Elakad's Giller Prize winning book, What Strange Paradise. And so many people have said that they enjoyed this book better. So I had to give it a try. And I too enjoyed this better, although I liked both of his books. So they're both good. I do have to admit that I started this book 3 times. So it was not one of those books that I easily connected with. It didn't grab me right away. But I have to say that the main character, Surratt, definitely grew on me. And the more I read, the more I enjoyed the book. In the last part, I was totally into the story. The story takes place in 2074, and America is going through a civil war. So this kind of beckons back, actually, to Escape from Camp 14, because Surratt is only 6 when her family is forced to live in a camp for displaced persons. And members of her family have died, and Surratt becomes influenced by what is going on around her, obviously. So she becomes dangerous and is basically used as a weapon of war, which makes her unbelievably scary, but also a badass. Like, I think my favorite part is the end part, because that is where we see what some of her decisions have done to her own family, and we learn how the war has affected her, and then also like how her family respond to her. I thought this was a really well thought out book, and it is an interesting look at the question, what might happen if America were to turn its most devastating policies and deadly weapons upon itself. So that is interesting. So this is a good read for anyone who is interested in a dystopia sci-fi kind of read and a really like kick-ass main character. So these are all the books that I read in April. Overall, it was a pretty good reading month. I think I had 4 or 5 books that I rated 5 stars, so I'm really good with that. Please let me know if you have read any of these books, or if any of them interest you. Do you want to read any of them? What was your favorite read in April? I'd love to hear all about it, and I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.